Shouty, it's like a melody in my head. Seth gets me milk chocolate cookies all the time, which he knows that I'm not a big fan of. But then he gets the double chocolate, which I want, and then he's like, nah, you can't have any. Anyway, welcome back to the Any Good Book Review. Today, Replay by Ken Grimwood. Mariku. Round of applause, guys. I'm gonna single-handedly thank this book now for properly getting me back into reading. While Cosmos was a good book, I find it hard to dedicate a certain amount of the time of the day to it. 13 chapters in Cosmos, half a chapter a day. You'll be done in 26 days, right? And then I just end up cramming the last bunch of chapters in the last couple of days because I couldn't make time for it. I read this book. This book has 21 chapters in this book. I read through the whole thing in about 2 weeks because I loved this book. This book was so good. Alright. Plot. Jeff Winston is about to have a telephone call with his wife, which seems to be very serious, before he then has a heart attack, but then wakes up and he's in the body of his 18-year-old self, having retained all of his memories. And I'm going to read the last couple of lines of chapter 1, if I can find it. The world beyond those windows was no dream. It was as solid as it was innocent, as real as it was blindly optimistic. Spring, 1963. There were so many choices to be made. I'm gonna come back to that later. He wakes up, he's 18, but he has the mind of a 40-something-year-old, right? 43, I believe it was. 43? Hold on a second. I know for a fact Bruno's gonna be upset if I get that wrong, because she's very particular. 88 take away 63, 88 becomes 28. So 88 to 63, 88 take away 60 is 28, 28 take away 3 is 25. So if he's 43 years old in his mind, but in the body of an 18-year-old. And it starts off pretty conventional. He does everything that I guess me and you would do if you're like me, that is. And that is, he takes the opportunity to bet on a bunch of sporting events and become insanely rich. Use the money to start a global company, which makes him more rich. He knows he's going to have a heart attack at 43, so he tries to, keep fit, become super hench. And of course, he, improves the dating aspect of his life, I guess you could say. That's the polite way of saying it. I have kids watching these videos. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's just basically everything that, isn't too boundary pushing when it comes to living your life a second chance. The kicker is he hits 43, he's super healthy, super fit and everything. He still has a heart attack. And then he wakes up and he's 18 again. And he's retained the memories of this new life as well. So at this point, if you say he's 43 at the beginning, and then he goes another 25 years, he is now 43, and then 63. He's now 68 years old in an 18-year-old's body. In his previous replay, that's what he calls every time he lives this time loop, he had a daughter, and now she no longer exists, and he really loved her, and he is unbelievably cut up. He's trying to figure out why it's happening to him, what the purpose of it is, some kind of higher meaning. At one point, he tries to stop the assassination of JFK, which doesn't work, and then he keeps on ending up back at 18. And that's when it starts to spiral. He realizes that he's not enjoying this chance of living his life again and again. It's proven to be a curse because he keeps losing everything that he built. It then leads to like a depressive episode where he spent basically the entire replay with women and drugs. Essentially, he's gone through every aspect that you can at that point of what you would do if you have no higher meaning and you just are stuck in this loop. That is until he meets Pamela Phillips, I believe her name is, who is also stuck in the same time loop. Well, not the same time loop, but I'll get to that in a bit. There's this belief that the two are soulmates because they seem to be the only two people who are experiencing it, and they're meant to have found each other. That's what the point of it was. And then that's when you realize they have this desire to find out what is the point, what is causing them to live this phenomenon over and over again, and they try to find out. In their efforts, Pamela ends up producing a movie which is meant to be inspired by the experience she's gone through, which is how Jeff finds her in the first place. They end up finding a man called Stuart McCowan, who is also a replayer. He's under the belief that aliens are replaying the same 20 years, 63 till 88, because at the point of writing this book, they claim that it's the most violent 20-year period in the history of humanity, and aliens like the violence, and it's up to these replayers to appease the aliens, right? So what does Stuart McCowan do? He goes around killing a bunch of people, including a little girl, some prostitutes, some street kids, hitchhikers, thinking he's doing his duty. This kind of revelation negatively impacts Jeff and Pamela's relationship, which is a recurring theme. They spend so many years together, living up until their point of their deaths, replaying and finding themselves again. They clearly have a very strained relationship. At the best times, it's incredibly fruitful, and then at the worst, it's very, very bad. As is with most relationships, I imagine. So in order to be able to expose the reason for why they're stuck in this time loop, they decide to take it public. They announce to the whole world that they are in this time loop by basically saying a bunch of stuff they know is going to happen, like big political stuff, which obviously leads to some people thinking that they're like some kind of like God on earth kind of thing, but really they're just saying, no, we're stuck in this time loop and we can't get out. We're just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. In that lifespan, they are held under arrest by the government because their government wants them to, what's the phrase, I guess, monitor governmental operations, things like terrorist attacks and a bunch of other stuff as well. And obviously, governments being governments, sometimes they interfere, sometimes they don't, which leads to them saving a bunch of lives, but at the same time, sometimes people died. And obviously this weighs a lot on the mentality of both Jeff and Pamela. Jeff seems to think that they're doing the best that they can, whereas Pamela is not taking that kind of news very well. Now, the driving plot device, aside from the replay, is a small fact of the replay, which I think is a little bit more tragic than having to live the life over and over again, and that is the skew. The skew is a slight alteration to the duration of the replay every time they go back. Jeff notices this at first when he realizes that when he goes back to when he's 18, it's not the exact same point that he woke up the first time. It's maybe a couple of hours later. And it seemed to get exponentially bigger, that skew, every time he went back. So you can imagine what it looks like, right? You're here, you're 43, and then suddenly back here, you're 18. You live your life again, but instead of coming here again, you're like here. Next time you're here, then here. And it keeps getting, that distance of travel keeps getting bigger and bigger until eventually it reaches to a point where that gap goes back so infinitely small, but at the same time moves so infinitely closer. So you go back like this much, and then you go back forward, and then you live that much. I thought it was really clever because, first of all, the tragic side of it, because they don't skew at the exact same time, there'll be a point where Pamela hasn't awoken, she hasn't started her replay. It's the default version of her before her replay starts living, so that person obviously doesn't know who Jeff is because she hasn't retained the memories yet of Jeff. So Jeff's just there, and there's a girl that he's spent many lifetimes with who doesn't remember who he is, which is really sad. And then it's really, really happy when she awakens and she's replayed, her replay started, and then she sees him and it's like, oh, that's so sweet, they found each other, which is really cute. But the smart thing about it is that it allows, at the end, for there to be a completely rebooted version of the timeline that was lived at the beginning of the book. In the first chapter, before the replay starts, Jeff's just living his life, about to have a heart attack at 43, and his life is normal. The timeline only changes as long as you interact with the timeline, okay? Jeff has to actually do something. But if your replay only lasted a millisecond, how much possible impact could you have had on that timeline? So it's allowed him to live multiple lifetimes, and still at the end of the book, when his replays stop and he is now just living the life he was at the beginning, because his last replay, which was probably less than a millisecond long, is essentially just his initial timeline because he's not had enough time to impact it. Such an organic way to bring you back to the beginning, not just, oh, and suddenly the replay stopped. It's not that they stopped, it's that they reached this infinite point where they no longer can continue because the replay is so short. He calls Pamela at the end, finds out that the replays definitely were real, it wasn't some kind of like coma hallucination or whatever, and it wasn't some alien invasion. We actually never find out what caused the replay, which I thought, perfect. I don't want to know. That's not the point of the book, okay? Besides, it ruins any mystique, like the whole replay phenomenon anyway. You know, you don't want to know what caused it. But the reason why I loved it is because of this last line in the book. The only thing that mattered was that the quarter century or so he had remaining would be his life, to live out as he chose and in his own best interest. Nothing took precedence over that. Not work, not friendships, not relationships with women. Those were all components of his life, and valuable ones, but they did not define it or control it. That was up to him, and him alone. The possibilities, Jeff knew, were endless. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I think the philosophy of this book is, which sounds really weird to say. I don't know if Ken Grimwood ever intended the book to teach a philosophy, but you've probably heard of these two sayings, right? The first one, very, very cut and dry. Live life like it's your second chance. If you're going to dissect it, what does it mean? You wake up and your life has started again. What would you do? It's natural for humans to feel regret. We're totally worrying about our mortality all the time. It's not so much that death scares us, it's the idea that we're confronted with this idea of, have we actually lived our life properly? And I think that being shoved back into the body of an 18-year-old basically just opens up the door for you to be a child again, right? Think from the perspective of a child. Like, do things that you think matter because of a very warped perception of what living life is. Success, money, relationships, things that are very conventional and can offer a lot, but ultimately, if you were put in a position of a time loop where you had to do it over and over again, those things become meaningless. And I guess anything would. That's why the Skew helps a lot in terms of the mental side of it, because the replays get shorter, basically. So the time for you to get bored of your lifestyle obviously is reduced a lot. It would be a different story if he replayed, but he lived longer each replay, because then life just becomes infinitely bigger. And then at that point, like, I don't know about you, I would not want to be immortal. It just sounds depressing. I think all things naturally have an end. I think there's a poetic beauty in that. That leads on to my second point, the other phrase that I was talking about. Maybe you've heard. I believe it was in Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. I might be paraphrasing a bit, I don't remember a lot, but live life like you've already made all your mistakes. In every subsequent replay, Jeff Winston makes a lot of mistakes, and he literally has all the answers all the time. He's lived that 25 years multiple times, okay? He knows everything that's going to happen. He knows what songs are going to come out, which stocks to invest in. He knows when his parents are going to die, when they're going to get sick. He knows how much time to spend with them. He still made mistakes. Otherwise, his relationships would have been perfect. He wouldn't have been unhappy all the time. So the way I see it is, you should acknowledge the mistakes you made and not constantly wish to try things again and again. You've made the mistakes, you've made your choice, but the beauty of that is you've made your choice. He was robbed of his choice to live his lifestyle when he decided to go public, him and Pamela, because his life was then dictated by the government, who wanted to use his replay factor for completely worldly gains. But then he wakes up at the end of the book, his replays have stopped, he has the same phone call with his wife that they need to talk, and he's content, he's happy for the first time genuinely in a long time, because nothing now dictates the control of his life except for him. He can make a choice, suffer the consequences of that choice, but also maybe benefit. Point is, he doesn't know. He's not stuck in a hell of things you already know are going to happen, things that can't ever change. And isn't that what makes life beautiful, basically? The fact that it's the unknown. It's what keeps it exciting, it's what keeps it fresh. You'll never know what's going to happen, and that's a good thing. And the reason why I like this book so much is because I had this moment where it's like a look out the window moment, and like, I want to live my life properly now. I want to stop wishing for things I used to wish before, like, oh, I wish I could go back in time and change my degree. Oh, I wish I could go back in time and not go to an all-boys high school. I would not want to live my life again. The life that I'm living and the life that I haven't lived yet is infinitely more exciting than the life I've already lived. Why would I want to live the life that I've already lived when the life that I'm going to live is so exciting and unknown? My past shouldn't define my future. All the bad things that happened to me in the past shouldn't stop me from being able to make the choices I want to make in the future. I think a book that pushes you to that level of deeper thinking is one that is a very good book. Having said that, what did I not like about the book? I think a natural thing you're going to find with a lot of readers, at least if you ask me, is that because he lives various different lifestyles, he essentially plays a different character every time he replays. You'll find, oh, I wonder which lifestyle I would live. If I had one chance to replay, which of these lifestyles would I be? Would I go back and be the one that gets super rich, super fit, have a lot of relationships or whatever? Or would I be the one that just goes around doing drugs all the time, which is what he does at one point in the book? The way I see it is that the one that you relate to is the one that reflects your character, which I think is pretty natural. You're going to be like, oh yeah, that would be me. Early on, it's meant to be the immature lifestyle, very one-dimensional version of, oh yeah, I'm just going to go for money, relationships, looking wham or whatever. And then I'm thinking to myself, that's not really what I would do, and how deep it goes into that psyche was not the most exciting to me. It just kind of seemed like what anybody would do. So I guess for me the book started off pretty slow, but that's also the best part in terms of the pace of this book. It got increasingly more and more, oh my god, what's going to happen, exciting as you go on. If a book is going to be slow and fast at any point, I'm thankful that it was slow at the beginning and then fast at the end, as opposed to quick at the beginning and then just slow down at the end, which I feel is a little bit more of a disappointment. But it's a very minor thing. That kind of effect only lasts for maybe the first 4 chapters. The last 17 are whoa, and then there's an epilogue which is really nice. It's meant to be the lead up to a second book, but I believe Ken Grimwood died before he completed that. It would have been exciting to see. This little snapshot of the concept of a time loop is so well thought out and refreshing. Offers plot device in the Skew that I haven't really seen it in anything else before. I've seen just time loops, just living it over and over again. The very source code, but this is different. Offers a new perspective, which I enjoyed. I love this book. Is the book any good? I would probably give it 4 out of 5. That stuff at the beginning drops off that star, but still one of the best books I've ever read. Maruku smashed it with this selection. That was Any Good Book Review, Replay by Ken Grimwood. Next book. The Kindle edition for this book was 99p, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not 99p? And then I ended up wanting to actually have the physical book. The books have been so much easier to read as they're physical. I realized I'm so bad at reading them on a Kindle, and I'm so glad I bought it because I finished it, and I definitely have some thoughts on it. 40 Rules of Love by Elif Shafak. I got like a very Jordan B. Peterson kind of vibe from the title. I can't wait to talk about this. That's going to be the next review. If you like this kind of video, be sure to smack up the like button, smack down the subscribe button, leave a comment if you have any book recommendations for me, and as always, roll credits.